bag, no bread, no copper in their money belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on two tunics. And he said to them, in whatever place you enter a house, stay there till you depart from that place. And whoever will not receive you nor hear you when you depart from there, shake off the dust from under your feet as a testimony against them. Surely I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So then they went out and preached that people should repent. And they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. So here we see Jesus calling his disciples, and this is the first time that they're sent out, and this is the purpose of the message. But I want you to see what happened, that they were sent out to represent a different kingdom. They were sent out to be completely dependent upon Jesus. They were sent out and they were told that rejection is probably going to be likely, that persecution is going to happen. They were told about the spiritual warfare that they would encounter, but they were also reminded that there will be eternal rewards on the other end of the trip. And just imagine as they're going out, just the excitement that they had about Jesus. These disciples weren't old people. These were young people. These were maybe in their late teens, early 20s, these disciples being sent out, and they had been spending this time with Jesus. And this is what discipleship should look like, that we spend time together, that we teach and invest, but then we release to go and do ministry. And when they come back, we evaluate and we rest and we find out what worked and we continue that process. That's how discipleship should work, that we are disciples who make disciples. But so we remember who we are and what we've been called to do. So that's the first thing that we need to know whenever we're thinking about this idea of rest. Who we are. You know who you not? You know who you not are? You know who you're not? You're not God. Our bodies need rest. In fact, the idea, it's spiritual arrogance and spiritual pride for you to think that you can continue to push on and do more without taking time to rest. It's arrogance, and we need to humble ourselves and remember who we are and what God has called us to do. The second thing I would say as disciples, we need to celebrate the wins and debrief the mission. And that's what we're going to be doing over the next coming weeks. And I'm going to be meeting with Dan and the people at the fair that were working, just find out, hey, what worked well? Like, what could we do better? What are some areas that our church could do to improve this? What are some things, what are some experiences that you had, some conversations that you had? And in fact, here in just a second, I'm gonna ask Kelly and Josh to come up, and I'm just gonna ask them to kind of share some testimony about how they saw God working in their life this week. Whenever Josh was leading the group at Hannah House, now Kelly was leading the group with Lego Camp. But we're called to celebrate the wins and debrief the missions. Look what it says in verse 30. It says, after the apostles got back, so there's a passage today. Why are we skipping verses 14 through 29? So Mark just gives us another example of something that was going on of John the Baptist, who just got beheaded. And now the disciples are coming back, and it says in verse 30, then when the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. This should be a part of what our church does on a regular basis. It's not always going to be on a Sunday morning, but in our small group communities and in the circle of friends that you surround yourself with, we need to be people who are gathering together and we're talking about what God has done in our life that week. The opportunities that we've got to teach others and share our testimony or share truths of Scripture that week. And so today, that's what I want us to do. I just want to model what this should look like. So I'm going to ask Josh to come up, and he's just going to share a little bit about what God did this week at Hannah House, working through Josh and with the group. And then after Josh gets up, I'm going to have Kelly come up and share kind of what happened at Lego Camp.
All right, just let me get through this coffee stained notebook. Thanks to Elise. No, it's actually funny to just think. As Kevin was speaking, I was thinking God is working in our lives every day, always, and it's either a failure for us to see it or understand it. And in some of those moments, you know, it can quickly be a glimpse, and then you miss it. So the coffee on the notebook is kind of funny because I was in the back and I saw Elise running over to give Amber a hug because she hadn't seen her in a week. And And, it's just awesome to see people welcoming Amber into the church because she hasn't been here that long. And she leans over and spills coffee on my notebook. And I told Elise, I was like, well, this is just constantly going to be a reminder of the day you spilled coffee on my notebook. But what I didn't tell her is because I saw her lean over to give Amber a hug. So, God is always working, and maybe we just failed to see it because it was just a glimpse, and then something else got our attention. So, sorry, I had to beat you up about the coffee, but yeah. So I worked at the Hannah House for 3 days with a crew of like 10 guys. We tore out some carpet, we put down some vinyl flooring, we did some paint work, we did some trim. The room ended up amazing. Everybody was so thrilled at the Hannah House. Like, it was just a great blessing to be able to do that for them. So as Kevin asked me, to come up and talk about what we did, I mean, obviously you could go there and you could see the work from where we started to where it ended. But I thought of all the people that ended up in that place at the same time for that reason to work, the conversations that we had, God put all that in motion for that to happen, right? Like, there were people from, like, it wasn't just one church group. There were kids from all over. There was a father and a son there that I'm going to share a story about them here in a minute. They were in my group. And then there was Pastor Ryan, who, there's going to be another good story. I didn't know he was a pastor. But I didn't say anything inappropriate. It was just the way that the way that it worked out. Like, it was a great time to share with these guys. I was just thinking, like, often we might not think of all the people who are put in our lives at that moment. Like, God, that's God, and maybe we don't know why they're there, or maybe we don't know why we're there. And sometimes you may just feel as though you should say something or do something. And I would tell you, if you feel that compelled to say something, say it. It doesn't matter what it is. Maybe you'll say the wrong thing, but often you'll find that you'll say exactly what you need to say in the moment. And maybe they needed to hear something that you don't even know that you said. But I also wanted to say, it's easy for me to stand up here and say, well, yeah, we did this ministry work, and this is where I saw God this week. But I had written other instances of where I've seen God in my week, and I just wanted to share those. And I could have a notebook full of these, and we all should be able to have a notebook of the things where we see God working in our week. But I just wanted to give you a few others. So I was speaking with Dan at the church, and he was telling me about his sister, who Dan has always known her to be, far from God. And just one thing that Dan said, I thought, oh, that's amazing, is that his sister said she would pray for him. His sister that he thought was far from God is now praying for Dan, and Dan has been praying for her. So praise God, like, that's such a blessing. That's amazing to hear, so that was just something in the church family. Within the community, this would be an interesting one, and Amber's going to go, here he is talking about who's your soulmate. So there's a Korean place on 3rd Street that I go to for lunch occasionally, and the guy that I work with, he's not in church, he's not Christian. And in the men's restrooms, there's a urinal, and always in front of the urinal, they'll post something for you to read because we need to read something while we're standing there. And that's true no matter, almost anywhere you go. Corey and I, the guy I work with, were having a conversation about how much he likes when there's a sale ad up there so he can read it, right? So we go to this Korean restaurant all the time, and I've never been in the bathroom. And he goes, every time he walks in, he goes in the bathroom, comes out. So I go in for the first time the other day, and I noticed that they have Bible verses up in front of the urinal, right? So each one's got a different Bible verse. And I got up, I walked in there, and I was just taking pictures of them, right? I was like, I came in to wash my hands, and I'm taking pictures, and I thought, this is awesome, to come into a place and see that God's just knocking on even the guy that I work with that I know is far from God, and I know that he tells me he has no desire, but he has to read those every time he goes in there. And I would say, if anybody hasn't been to Who's Your Soulmate, go ahead and try it out. It's a great place, and they're Baptists. Like, it's a neat little place. So a little plug for them. The other thing I have in here is just in my everyday life. When we're working out in the garden, so we have a garden. It's nothing fantastic, it's a nice little garden. It'll provide some food, and I look at the vines that are growing, and they're grabbing a hold of grass, and they're just pulling the watermelon just a little bit further out into the yard, or I look at the flowers and I think about us weeding it, watering it, think about the seeds that were planted for that garden. And I just think of how I see God in that little garden, right? Just and how that reflects on our lives. And then it makes me think when we go, even in the summer, you know, you think it's summer, we spend a lot of time outside, but we go from a man-made house with man-made AC and comforts into our man-made car with AC, and we do all of these things, and often we do neglect to see God in our everyday lives. And I would say to anybody who feels that way, just go outside and spend any amount of time looking at the trees, the flowers, creation, because it is beautiful, and there is no way you can go out there and not see God working. So one quick story about that. So another thing that I often do when we're working or when I'm doing anything is I try to incorporate what I'm reading into the work we're doing. So just the other day, Amber and I were pulling weeds, and I was reminded of Matthew 13:29. Know, lest while you gather up the weeds, you also uproot the wheat with them. So we were pulling weeds, and she yanked out part of a green bean, right? She was like, "Oh no, I pulled a green bean." And so immediately my mind went to that Bible verse. So I say that to go into where Kevin asked me to speak on what I was able to teach. This is something that I don't know, maybe I don't enjoy talking about what I do. I would much rather talk about what others are doing. And I know it's not me, it's God through me. Uh, so with this father and son that I was working with, and I won't say their names, but the father was, he traveled with his son. He wanted to spend some time with him. That was the story that I got. And so it ended up with he, myself, and the pastor, who I didn't know was a pastor, working together at the ham house. And we were quiet. We were all just painting. Nobody was saying anything. And this is awkward. I'm going to start asking questions. So, what's your favorite Bible verse? What's your favorite book of the Bible, right? These guys are Christians. We should all have these things in common. So we start talking, and the answers are, well, I don't know. I haven't really read my whole Bible. And I thought, oh, well, that's all right. What do you read now? So I just continued the conversation. And so, he spoke of where he was reading. He was reading James. I just happened to also be reading James, so we could talk about that. And then I asked him a question that sparked something in him that was amazing. So I asked him, I said, hey, I am recently married, and I am looking to develop good habits with my wife in prayer and reading her Bible. And I said, do either of you, I said this to both of them, either of you have an example for me in what I can model? And he said nothing. The gentleman said nothing, and then he looked at me and he said, I've failed to do this in my family as a father and as a husband. And I just saw this look come over his face, like he just had this epiphany, this realization, and he said, I've been neglecting my wife. I haven't been doing what I should be doing. And he just went on and on and on, and he just had all these moments of where he said, I can't wait to get home. I need to apologize to her. I've been spending my time fishing. I haven't been taking care of anything at the house, and just all of these things. And that's not why I said that, right? I wasn't like, hey, are you praying with your wife? That wasn't it at all. I was like, hey, you got any good ideas, for how this can be more fruitful for myself? And so the more he talked about it, the more I realized, like, oh, now he's beating himself up. So what I was able to tell him in John 15, it talks about the pruning that God does in us. And so I told him, I said, hey, don't beat yourself up. I said, this is just God pruning you. I said, he's always faithful to us. You just need to remain faithful to him. That was what I told him. He seemed to like that. He was like, oh, okay. He's like, that's good. And then I told him not to discount the work that God has already done in our lives, because that's something that we can easily do, is neglect to see the work that has been done and only look to the work that we know needs to be done. So I told him, I said, don't beat yourself up. I said, you were just telling me when you were 14, you were doing drugs, and he's got a, amazing story coming to Christ. And I said, don't discount all the work that's been done. And I said, your son's amazing. I said, he's here with all these kids. When I was his age, I wasn't doing this, right? I said, so don't discount the work that God has already done in your life. And then I was able to share a few more things with them. I told them my favorite Bible verse was John 3:33. And if you're not familiar with that Bible verse, it's those that accept his testimony know that God is true. And I explained to them why that was my favorite Bible verse. And then when we were leaving, I had said to them, Inshallah. So, Inshallah is something that they said when we were deployed. It was that the Iraqis would say. And it means God willing, if God wills it. So, and that's James 4:13. He talks about, if God wills it, then we will do it. So I shared that with them, and they thought that was neat. But I say these things to tell you, I'm not a pastor. I didn't go to seminary. I didn't do anything, right? Like I love Jesus. I read my Bible. I come to church. I have a church community behind me. And that whole time when I was sitting there giving this guy advice, it wasn't like a 2-minute conversation. We were working for quite a while. After I got done, the other gentleman that was with us said, yeah, that was all awesome. He's like, I've been pastor for 15 years. And I thought, oh, wow, here I am giving advice to this guy. And there's somebody who's been a pastor, and he said nothing the whole time. He just stood there smiling, listening. And so for what I learned, the impact that it had on me is you don't need to be a pastor to influence others. And when I first started coming to church, I always thought about what I don't know and how I, what the insignificant parts of or where my shortcomings is what I always looked at, not how could I reach this guy. So I would just encourage you, no matter where you are in your walk with Christ, to know that there is always somebody that you can reach out to, that you can teach something to, and maybe it's just what you've read that week in the Bible. That's the last thing I want to share with you is what I learned when I was trying to remember my Bible verses or different things. Is if something speaks to me and it really resonates in my heart, I make it a point to share that with at least 3 people that week. And I tell them the Bible verse and I just paraphrase it. I just tell them, oh, this is awesome. You should read this. And half the time they're like, all right, whatever, right? Like, I don't get it. But then it sticks in my heart and then I can repeat it again. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I got. So, yeah, I just encourage you to share whatever it is that's on your heart. So,
see that God is working in your life. I hear Josh sharing this story. That's encouraging me because this is what discipleship is. This isn't discipleship. That's not discipleship. Discipleship happens on a one-on-one basis of us living together and sharpening one another. So, thanks, Josh, for sharing.
I don't like doing this, so thank you, Kevin. So when Kevin asked me about sharing, I of course was thinking about, all the little faces at Lego camp and, how much fun they had with Legos, how we were able to, plant gospel seeds in their lives. And all of those things are great and wonderful. But then I started thinking like the 2 weeks before that, when this is why I can't do this. When people were at the church cutting paper into rectangles and drawing circles on them and hanging them on the wall, or cutting little strips of paper and drawing Lego faces on them, just silly things that didn't have to be done. It like life would have went on without it, but it was just part of that extra. And when I asked, nobody hesitated. It was just like, okay, give it to me. What you got? And I actually wound up having to come up with more things for people to do because I had so many people say, what do you need me to do? So, and those things don't go unnoticed. When parents came in, they're like, wow, this is really awesome. And the kids loved the water bottles and the Lego themed snacks and all of these things. So those things, when I think of ministry for me, it's not just right in this moment, like, how am I going to use these Legos to tell you about Jesus? It's, the the times that I come across you in life. They might not ever see me again, but they felt the love of Jesus all during this week. And there were some kids who came in here who needed the love of Jesus. In the first day, I felt really rushed and I was like, okay, this has to happen. This has to happen. This is my schedule and blah, 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 blah. And I looked out at the group of people who were here to help us, and they weren't worried. They weren't rushed. They didn't care if everything went perfectly right. They were just playing with these kids and spending time with them, which is exactly what we talked about, that they just need, some of these kids just need love. They just need to see love from somewhere. So that's one of the big things. But also, it's just these little touch points in the community, like the fair and like helping the Hannah House and passing out things that have our logo on them that people see, and even like they don't even realize they see it, and then they come to something like this. And there was a mom this week who was just like, I can't believe you guys are doing this. She's just overly thankful. This is so awesome. And she's like, we live in the neighborhood back behind here, and I've driven past here 100 times and seen the sign. And so when I saw it pop up online, I was like, oh, hey, I'm going to look at this. And so the first day she came and she brought her kids and she stayed with them for a little while. And then the second day she brought her kids and neighbors. And then the third day she brought her kids and neighbors. So it's just one of those things. And they're not in church. And she said that they may come and visit us. You know, there was a lady that Elise knows that came who's not currently in church that said that they might come visit us. So it's just, sometimes it's not about how can I reach you for Jesus right now. It's just about how can I impact your life and just push you a little bit closer in that direction. And I think a lot of times we get distracted by this has to be done right now. And if it doesn't, it's a failure. And we just need to kind of just take a breath, go with the flow, and it's okay. So yeah, and it was a huge blessing for me how God was working in my life. With COVID and all of it's kind of turned our ministry upside down. We haven't been able to have very many outreach things. We did like the egging the houses in the neighborhoods back here and the reverse trick-or-treating in the neighborhood back there, which is where the mom said that she had seen our logo before and she had just forgotten about it. But just having a room full of kids and just being able to go around and talk to them and interact with them, and even watch young people doing that and saying, maybe I want to be a teacher when I grow up, or, you know, maybe I can help with Sunday school at my church whenever I go back. Just seeing how it not only was impacting the kids, but it was impacting all these teenagers that were here working, was a blessing for me.
The reason why I asked Amen.